Hello, fellow egoists! I'm finally back and doing better in terms of health, so I decided to start posting again with a new episode of Understanding Ego, the series where we analyze as deeply as possible the ego of characters and generally the themes of Blue Lock. As you saw in today's title, we'll be analyzing the concept of devouring in Blue Lock past the usual "oh my god they're so gay" jokes, and truly look at what it means to devour, and why that concept is so important not only to egotism, but also the key to understanding important characters in the story, especially Isagi and Barou, which will be analyzed in another episode of Understanding Ego. Though for Isagi he has already been analyzed, simply that I'll be going more in depth and going on a few nuances of his, which are really important. So let's start by putting the first part of our analysis into play. A big thing with the term devouring is that it's used a lot but with different meanings, and depending on the context of the word, doesn't necessarily hold the same meaning. Because of this, before we can actually give a straight and universal meaning to the term devour in Blue Lock, we have to look at its three most distinct uses in the manga and look at the common points in each of them. The first meaning that we'll talk about is the one related to devouring skills. This is actually the first time that we're canonically introduced to the term devouring via Isagi devouring Naruhaya's off-the-ball movement technique. In this version of the word, we learn that devouring is related to making the skill of someone else's yours, going further than just copying it but making it entirely yours. What this means is that if we take the example of Rin's outside of the foot kick, which we'll just call a trivela, whereas Ryo would copy it by putting himself in the exact same position and do the exact same movement, if someone were to devour this technique, they would instead take the core of the technique, being the outside of the foot kick, and then be able to adapt it to their own skills and the situation at hand, therefore being able, for example, to do a similar kick but in a different position, the essence of the skill being used and adapted to the player's situation through their own adaptability. This is why devouring in this sense is stronger than just copying and is the evolution of it. Whereas copying is simply about literally acting the same way, devouring a skill is about taking the essence of it and adapting it to your own skill set and situation. Now, what's really important to arrive to our desired universal definition of the word devouring is that in this meaning, devouring, we take the skill of someone and make it ours. So with that said, we can head on to our second meaning of devouring, which is canonically first used in the match right after the 2v2 against Naruhaya, that being the 3v3 against Ryo, Kunigami and Shigiri. In this match we can introduce the most common way that people would describe devouring, that being the act of using someone for your own plays, which we saw via Isagi's way of using Barou to create his own light. A really interesting thing though is how, to Isagi, this is what it means to adapt on the battlefield. That is a football match, which once again goes back to how devouring is a step further than just copying, or in this case trying to link with someone blindly by matching with them. In this meaning of devouring, it's all about actively using the person, a physical manipulation of the field even if the person being devoured doesn't realize it until it's too late, such as Yukimiya for example. The truly important thing with this meaning of devouring is that it's all about taking someone's performance and making it a part of yours. When you devour someone this way, what you're doing is directly taking their performance and not only using it to make yourself shine brighter, but most importantly you're overshadowing them and quite literally taking away their agency, their role as a protagonist. Which leads us to the final meaning of devouring and the strongest one, or at least the one that's most commonly used in the manga, that being the act of overshadowing someone and their performance, which is what devouring is all about at the end of the day. As said before, the act of using someone and their performance for your own glory is one thing, but when you aim to devour someone such as the way Isagi and Rin both wanted to do in the U20 match, it wasn't about using each other literally and specifically, but rather trying to overshadow one another and steal the role of the protagonist of the field from the other one. The best example to show the difference between the direct use of someone such as we showed right before in the past definition and the way that we're talking about in this meaning is Isagi's block of Chris Priest's shot in the Manshine match. In this all-or-nothing play, Isagi is able to go further than anyone's reading of the field and block the new technique of the world's second best striker, without even looking at the shot. Now when you see such a feat, the first thing you think of is, holy shit, this was insane. and you immediately see Isagi as the shining star of the field for being able to do such a feat. Whereas right before Isagi did this block, you were probably all focused on Chris Priest's new shot and the absolute insanity of it. And this change in light of the field, this change in protagonist, is what Devouring is all about. Through this play, Isagi devoured Chris Priest's light, his role as the protagonist of the field, and instead took his place. He didn't literally manipulate the field the same way he did when he used barou back in the 3v3, but he still used Chris Prince as a way to make himself shine brighter. Another big example is once again in the 3v3, where pretty much everyone in the field was quote-unquote devoured by Isagi. In this match, we see not only how Isagi uses barou for his own glory and thereby becomes the protagonist of the field, to the point that barou even unconsciously passes to him as he recognized deep down that Isagi was the true protagonist of the field, but also how everyone else's individuality, when they were devoured, was clearly destroyed to the point that they became close to invisible on the field. The best examples being Kunigami and Reo, who were unable to do anything when Isagi awakened, and because of that were relegated to the role of second-rate protagonists in the match. Whereas Chigiri was rather able to assert himself and get out of this devoured state that he was in, which is why Isagi even decided to choose him as he was the only one able to quote-unquote exist when the stakes were raised. A last example and the reason why Isagi was even chosen as a striker for the U20 match is that just like Ego Jinpachi said, when thrown into a team with Rin, Isagi didn't stop at just linking up with him and instead fully went to his desire to be the true protagonist of the field. He was able to assert himself through a goal and devour the top 2 strikers of Blue Lock. Just like Shido said, for that last play, Isagi was the true number 1. And with this, we've seen the 3 big meanings of Devouring in Blue Lock, which are making the skill of someone else's yours, using someone else for your own plays, and overshadowing someone and their performance. So with all this, we can smash the 3 meanings together to give this definition to the term Devouring: using someone else's performance for your own glory, and overshadowing them in the process. With this definition, we have pretty much all of the elements talked about before, with quote-unquote someone's performance being their skills, their actual performance on the field, and generally themselves. We also get the fact that in the act of devouring someone, you make their performance a key part of yours. Their performance becomes a pedestal for you to shine brighter and finally overshadow them, and steal the role as the protagonist. Though some key details that we haven't talked about or rather highlighted are the fact that devouring doesn't only stop at your enemies, but also your own teammates. To devour the field and become the true protagonist of it means to quite literally be the ultimate egoist on the field, to follow a desire to be the only shining light on the field and even overshadow your own teammates, such as Isagi wanting to constantly devour Rin in the U20 match, or barou wanting to constantly devour Isagi in an attempt to shine more than him. The other key detail is that the act of devouring isn't only limited to a football. Everything we've talked about are things that could be applied in any field where a social link is needed, and there are a lot of real-life examples where you could say that someone is being devoured. The best example, or the most telling one I could find, would be a setting such as a group project in high school or in university, where you have someone that overshadows everything. They're the one who's the life of the party and pretty much decides the flow of the project by themselves. While it isn't something that you can quote-unquote rationally explain, such as Isagi says, it's something that you can definitely feel. That person is the one who's the lead protagonist of the project. And now what would be someone who's devoured in this case? It would be someone who's unable to assert themselves and is close to invisible. Unable to give a single thought out and goes with the flow even if they don't like it, simply because they don't have the ability to assert themselves. Unable to interact in any way because they're simply unable to deal with the raw energy given off by the quote-unquote lead actor of the project. And not necessarily because they're an introvert, for example, but simply because their individuality is being overwritten by the dazzling light of the lead actor. Another example would be in something such as a rap battle, an opposition between two parties where they fight for the role of protagonist in their fight, constantly going back and forth until one is winning and the other is losing. But what's really important is that devouring goes further than just losing. It's once again about the spotlight and the individuality being taken over. In a rap battle, everything is exaggerated, and if the one losing is unable to assert themselves back into the battle, then you have that phenomenon where the winner just overshadows the loser and the loser is simply forgotten, becoming a ghost of the performance that just happened, and people don't necessarily even remember anymore what he did. All they remember is the skill of the winner and how he was able to beat the loser with his insane flow, verses, or whatever the like. To be devoured is to have your role as a protagonist, to have your individuality be forgotten and most importantly put into a crisis in your own mind. Will you just let yourself fade away under this situation or rise up to try to insert yourself? And this position is similar to one of despair, where you're generally unable to project yourself into a position of dominance, into the future, or just of existence. Which is why people tend to awaken when getting devoured, because they're put in a situation where their individuality is being simply washed away in a sort of lukewarm haze, where they might even relegate their own desire to the trash simply to wash away the taste of defeat from their mouth. They are forced to either accept that despair, to accept that their individuality is being devoured and roll with it, or to rise up to the challenge and still try to assert themselves, which is why, as the story says, only those who can rise up can be considered true egoists. So next time you feel you're getting devoured, that you're being forgotten and simply used as a pedestal for someone else, ask yourself, am I fine with just being forgotten and used for another person to shine? Will you become an egoist and rise up to the challenge and assert yourself? Well, we will be there to see it. And so with this, the video is over. The aim for this video is simply that next time you see a line such as "I need to devour X" into the story, you think deeper about it. And what exactly is the character saying with this? Does it mean devouring a skill, using said person, or simply aiming to overshadow them and become the protagonist of the field thanks to it? With all that said, I hope you enjoyed the video and be ready for the next episode of Understanding Ego, where we'll look at Isagi, the Devourer. And with this, I hope you have a great one, fellow egoist.